A big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video. If you need a website or a domain, go to squarespace.com/James for 10% off your first purchase.
Hello everybody, how's it going? Welcome to a part of Anglesey that I haven't been to before. 3 aims today. Number 1, do a bit of a scout of said area that I've not been to before. Number 2, test a camera that I've got in my bag. And number 3, answer some questions that I asked for on Instagram last night. I said I was going to do like a Q&A, not done one for a while, and I thought we could answer some of those questions in today's video. Well, straight out the gate, this is quite a nice scene. I really like the farmhouses and obviously the wires, kind of man-made objects within the natural scene. Oh, some birds. And then obviously you've got the moon, the colour in the foreground, and I'm just trying to stoop a little bit so that the hill in the background does not intersect the wire, cable, whatever you call it. Could do with some closer birds. Oh, also, another thing I wanted to do today was test my new microphone. Hopefully you can hear me okay, and hopefully we don't have any sound problems today. How do I sound? Testes, testes. Well, isn't that a delightful view? In fact, I should probably start using the camera that I was mentioning. So this is a Leica M-P. You might remember a few months ago I tested a Leica M11. I really liked it in many ways, but I didn't think I'd use it enough to justify the that's the name of the camera, the £7,500 price. So I thought it might be possible to try an old one, or an older one. This is not an old Leica in Leica terms. It's about 10 years old, but when people talk about old Leicas, they normally talk about cameras that are 30, 40, 50 years old. I'm getting distracted. Yeah, this is a couple of generations old. Thought I'd try it. Although I'm trying it with a 35mm f1.4 lens from Voigtlander, which hasn't got the best reviews. Never good to try a camera with a lens that's not well received. So, I don't know, we'll see. Would probably have helped if I'd put the battery that I was charging back in the camera, wouldn't it? I suppose we'll test that another day. February. Could have fooled me. Oh, this is pretty epic. Like I said, I've never been here before, and currently I'm wondering why. Rather than questions, now I should stress that I haven't seen these questions yet. I haven't had a chance to look on Instagram this morning, and I can't now either. Couldn't load activity. I don't have any phone service. Well, this morning's going brilliantly. Sometimes I wonder how on earth I manage to get dressed in the morning, given some of my brain farts. And I have a child, someone who's dependent on me for their life, which is terrifying for him. Anyway, yes, I suppose I could go out and shoot with this now. Luckily, I went out a few days ago with it before I'd had a shave, and I attempted to make a video, which you will never see because it was incredibly boring. I don't think I made a single interesting point that day. All that really happened was I took some photos and then nearly lost my new microphone and got cut off by the tide. So yeah, pretty standard morning, that one, but I did enjoy shooting with the Leica M-P, whatever it's called. I do really like these cameras. They're silly expensive, really, really expensive, even this one, which, as I said, is nearly a decade old. But there is something about them which I really like. So much so that this morning I took delivery of a brand new Leica M11. It's going back immediately. I don't know what I was thinking. It was a moment of weakness, and tell you the truth, I made that M11 video, a few months ago now. Said what I liked, what I didn't like, thought nothing of it. But since then, I've not really been able to stop thinking about the camera, and I don't know why that is. You'll notice it's all still wrapped up. I bought a Voigtlander 50mm apo lens as well. But yeah, I'm being very careful not to open any of the boxes, as much as it's killing me, because I'd like to get it all out. But as I say, sending it back, and I don't want them to refuse the return. Anyway, let's do some questions, shall we? When are you getting a Leica? It looks like you're tempted. Well, yes, I've been a proud Leica owner for 3 hours, and DPD are coming in an hour to pick it up. By the way, welcome to my mind. This is how it works. I buy things and then decide I need to immediately return them because it was stupid to buy it in the first place. I do that a lot. Question 2, what's your favourite focal length? Funny, aren't you? There's a few of these. If you don't know, I've spoken about my favourite focal length once or twice recently. That's it. Do you still use your G9? Yeah, not really. This is my G9 and it's absolutely battered. There's bits of glue coming out of it there. It definitely still works, but I don't use it all that much because typically I use this instead, my GX1, which in some ways I prefer for the kind of photography that I typically end up using a small camera for. So no, I don't really use the G9 all that much, but I do use this. What have you learned because of photography? That's a good question. Patience, probably, I would say. We live in a world where you can basically have anything you want pretty much immediately. If you want to buy something online, chances are it will turn up the next day or even the same day. If you want to watch something on TV, you can find it pretty quickly. With photography, you can't get what you want straight away. Often you have to wait for the right conditions to be in the right environment. And yeah, I think having something in your life, i.e. photography in this case, that makes you wait for stuff is probably quite healthy in today's frantic world. It's quite a good answer, actually. Why do you prefer to shoot with Sony? Have you tried other brands before? Leica, Fuji, Lumix, Ricoh, Apple. Basically, I moved to Sony because I wanted better video autofocus for these videos, and it delivered in that. I'm sure other camera brands could do just as well, but yeah, I chose Sony because I knew they had good autofocus. I'm sure other brands do now as well. Basically, if you ever need an indication of how similar cameras from different brands are, look at the naming structures. So Sony has got A7s, Canon has got R5s and 6s, Nikon has got Z7s and 6s, Leica has got M7s, 11s, 3s, 6s, Lumix has G9s, Fuji has X3 Pro, whatever. I mean, they're all basically called the same thing, they all look pretty much the same, they have the same job, they're all very, very similar. There is so little difference between all of the best modern cameras now that you could switch between one another and you probably wouldn't notice the difference. And the biggest problem with choosing or changing ecosystems is that they're not like static things. Every year, each manufacturer is bringing out something new. So you might have Sony gear and you might look at Canon and go, oh, I quite like that feature. And you might decide to change everything over to Canon only for Sony to bring out something better the next year. And so you move all the way back to Sony and then Nikon comes out with something great. It's a nightmare. But the good news is they're all just copying each other. And thus, they all stay basically the same over time. What to do when you don't feel inspiration to shoot anymore? I buy expensive cameras. I don't think that's a very good solution, to be honest, but I don't have anything else. That's a lie, actually. Books always get me pumped to go out and shoot. So yeah, if I'm not feeling in the mood to go and take photos, I typically look at some books, and that usually gets the juices flowing. Could Fuji ever replace your Sony for professional use? Probably. I'm not sure anyone would notice the difference if I was using my X Pro 3 versus my A7R for most stuff, prints, books, whatever else. Probably. Do you have any photography regrets? Buying that Leica. But aside from that, most photography regrets I have revolve around not stopping for photos. So typically I drive around a lot or I'm a passenger a lot, and I'll go past a scene and I'll think, oh, that looks like a good photo. And for whatever reason, I won't stop. Maybe I can't be bothered to get my camera out of the bag. Maybe it's raining. Maybe I'm just tired. But in most of those cases, I really regret not stopping. And it might have taken 30 seconds to get out and take a photo, but I'll think about it for like 2 or 3 days if I don't stop. And I'll always think I've missed like a portfolio photo, even when I haven't. So I always regret not stopping. So if you think you see a photo, stop. Would owning a 50mm prime truly improve your photography? How? It's not necessarily owning a prime that would improve your photography. You can do this with a zoom as well, but limiting yourself to a particular focal length, and I find 50 is pretty good at this, will improve your photography, in my opinion. If you've only got one focal length to use, it forces you to work a scene so much harder than you would with a zoom. You have a lot fewer options, and that requires you to work harder. And that process will definitely improve your thinking as a photographer. So even if you don't have a prime, using a zoom to pretend you have a prime is an invaluable exercise, I think. I think I've made a couple of videos about it a long time ago. But yeah, prime or not, limit yourself to particular focal lengths can work wonders. Gear you regretted buying the most. Best camera for under $300. I would start with the Lumix GX1. When I bought this was only £50, so about $70. But yeah, I would look at something like this, or a newer version of this. I don't know if you can pick up a GX9 for $300, but that's where I'd look. Besides the Antarctica trip, will you lead any other workshops? Yes, there's one in the description, the Arctic, next year, July 2024. And do you do any one-to-one tours? Not at the moment, maybe in the future I will when I'm not trying to pump out YouTube videos. But yeah, not at the moment. I struggle to know when to stop editing. What's your approach and when do you know when it's done? Basically, edit little and often. So if you think a photo's finished, leave your desk, go and make a cup of tea or something, come back to your desk, have a look at the photo. If you like it, you're done. If it looks a bit odd, you've gone too far. And basically just repeat that process until you come back to your computer or your phone or your iPad, whatever you're editing on. And if you get back to your device and you still like the photo, you're good. But it's amazing how a little break and a change of scenery can affect how you feel about one of your edits. And I find quite often that I'll come back to my computer, having left an edit for a little while, and I'll think, that is hideous. And I'll start again. So yeah, that's probably my biggest tip. Leave and come back until you're happy with it. What would you say is key when learning composition in photography? Every scene, unless you're shooting something really minimal, every scene will have kind of more than one object or element in it. And your job as a photographer, certainly in terms of composition, is to work out how best to make those elements complement each other. And so let's say you've got like a car and a lamppost, for instance. You can probably stand in a place whereby those two things will overlap each other. Or you could choose to stand somewhere where they're separated. And rule of averages, I'm guessing that the photo where they're separate will probably look a bit cleaner than if they're clashing. And that's basically what composition is, trying to work out how mountains and a hut or water and a tree, how they can all work together to make a photo that's more than the sum of their parts, rather than a photo that's less than the sum of their parts by way of them distracting from each other and stuff. That's how I try and think about composition. I don't know, that car and a lamppost is the best. Hopefully that helps. How many countries have you been to? Funnily enough, the other week, I tried to work this out. I was in my son's bedroom. He was sort of fast asleep on me and I was pinned, basically. I couldn't move at all. And he's got a map, a world map on his wall. And I tried to work it out. I think it's just under 40. I can't remember exactly though. But I remember thinking, I've got nothing to do here. I'm going to have to do something like try and remember how many countries I've been to. So yeah, slightly less than 40. Don't ask me to name them. Is editing your photos fun for you? It's one of my favourite things in the world. When it starts to feel like a job, I get all sad because I feel like a hobby has been ripped off me. But editing, I probably prefer more than the actual photography, if I'm honest. I love it. Normally helps that I like to do it with a beer or 2 or 6. How do you go about finding new locations to shoot? Google Street View is probably my favourite tool ever. And I mean, it helps that I like to shoot man-made things quite often. And most man-made things are fairly close to roads, so you can see what they look like before you go to locations. But yeah, Google Street View is the most powerful tool I've ever used for location scouting, I would say. How important is good light? Can you make the most of bad/flat light? Light is probably the most important aspect of photography, but there's no such thing, I don't think, as bad light. Now the thing is, if you have really beautiful light, that can be a subject within itself. If you have flat light, then you need to look for a compelling subject because the light isn't providing the curiosity. Now actually, if you find a compelling subject, then flat light can work brilliantly because it doesn't overwhelm the scene. If you've got like a really colourful subject, for instance, flat light will really help it stand out in a way that sometimes really beautiful light might overpower. So I'm definitely of the opinion that any kind of light can work really, really well. It's just that you need a subject that will work in that kind of light. And it's definitely easier to take photos when the light's really good because you don't need to work as hard at finding a subject. But if you have a compelling enough subject, then the light is never really that much of a concern, I don't think. When will you run workshops in the US? It's very difficult to do. Insurance is incredibly expensive for running workshops in the US because you guys love a lawsuit. From what I've heard, it's also tricky to get a visa, so I would love to. I don't know how possible it is though. I am coming to America though once or twice this year, hopefully. At least once, hopefully twice. And I haven't been to America for a long time, so I'm really looking forward to it. Why have you chosen the landscape genre over wildlife, macro, etc.? I don't think that we choose our interests. I think sometimes we try to manipulate them. If, for instance, a friend is interested in something, we might try and become interested in that thing. But I think more often than not, our brains tell us what we're interested in, and then we have a choice about whether to act on that or not. I've never really considered myself a landscape photographer, really, because typically I'm most interested in subjects and how they're interacting with the landscape, rather than the landscape itself. So yeah, that's always been an interest, and I didn't choose it. I just sort of notice when I go past places, I think, oh, that looks nice, I'll take a photo of it. I don't necessarily think about why it is that I've chosen to sort of partake in a particular genre of photography. Partake. That is a word, isn't it? Partake. Sounds odd. Partake. How to get over the anxiety of shooting street photography. Start a YouTube channel. If you start a YouTube channel, pretty quickly you get over the idea of people having opinions about you and what you're doing, because they will. So yeah, ever since I've had a YouTube channel, my worry about other people's opinions of me has sort of plummeted, which has been really healthy for me, actually. So yeah, I'd say start a YouTube channel. In your eternal quest for focal distance, have you tried the Voigtlander 40mm f1.2 for Sony? What, you mean this 40mm f1.2 for Sony? Watch this space. Would you accept being a brand ambassador again if approached by one? No, I don't think I would. Certainly not while I've got a YouTube channel. For a couple of reasons. If you are associated with a camera manufacturer, it doesn't do wonders for your integrity of your YouTube channel when you're talking about gear, because you've got a commercial relationship with one of the manufacturers, and so anything you're saying about the manufacturer that you use, or in fact any other, the legitimacy of your opinions is obviously going to be questioned. And the other thing is that typically, if you have a commercial relationship with a manufacturer, you're signing some sort of exclusivity agreement. And what that means is that you can't use cameras from any brand. You have to use cameras from that brand. And as much as I don't want this channel to be all about camera gear, people like to see you using different equipment. So I don't think it would be advantageous for me to sign an exclusive deal with any manufacturer. So I can't see myself doing it, no. Unless I was to be offered massive megabucks. So, did I mention that this video is sponsored by Canon? Joking. What do you do outside of photography / YouTube? I used to do loads of things. I used to play football, used to run, used to play a lot of golf, lots of cycling, mountain biking, particularly. Then we had a son, and now my main hobby is survival. I spend pretty much all my spare time now just clearing up the carnage that he's created in the last 10 minutes. That's my biggest hobby. Do you need a special monitor to edit photos? It helps having a fairly colour accurate monitor to edit photos, particularly if you're going to share them anywhere or you're going to print them. If you don't want to spend money on a monitor, what I'd suggest that you do is get good at editing your photos on a phone. So for most people, their phone is their most high resolution colour accurate screen that they have access to. And if you don't want to edit on your phone, you can just put your images on your phone after you've edited them just to check what they look like. And modern phones, you can usually trust the screens. Unless, of course, you're using some sort of blue light filter late at night or something. But aside from that, you can normally trust phone screens. For what it's worth, I've got a ViewSonic, I can't remember the name of it. I'll put it on a video somewhere. It's good. How did you find your photography style? I went to a talk at an Apple store in London 11, 12, 13 years ago, something like that. And there was a photographer there, I can't remember his name, which sucks. But he was asked this question and he basically said, it takes time. It takes thousands of photos, thousands of hours, and that's it. And I remember thinking, what a rubbish answer. And here I am, over a decade later, and I've now changed my mind, and that's a perfectly reasonable answer. It's only by exposing yourself, you'll pardon the pun, to lots of different things, lots of different times, that you really get a sense of what it is that interests you and what it is that you want to take photos of. And from there, how you want those photos to look when they've been edited. And there's no shortcut that I know of It just takes time. And also the other thing I'll say on this is that people often think about finding your style as like a destination. Oh, you found it, you're there. But the reality, I think, is that when you become more experienced, your style starts to change less, but it definitely keeps evolving because your interests keep evolving. So yeah, style isn't just this thing that stays put and static. I think it keeps changing regardless of how many years you've been taking photos. But yeah, time, basically. What's something you wish you knew when first getting into photography? Or I wish I knew that when people were teaching photography, the vast majority of what they were saying was opinion, not fact. And lots of people, me included, I've done it a whole lot on this channel, I'm really conscious of it. Lots of people, when they talk as though something is fact, but actually they're just very sure about their opinion. And those two things are so different. And actually this links to another question that I've just seen, which is what are the most common apertures used in your work? So for me, I would say it's like f5.6 probably, because on most of the lenses that I use, I know that they're going to perform pretty much best at that aperture, given that they're still letting in quite a lot of light, and therefore I'm not going to have to raise my ISO loads. And obviously because I shoot handheld, that's the kind of consideration I need to make. Now when you're starting photography, there will be lots of people that just tell you, you need to shoot at f16 so that you get everything in the frame in focus. Now for me and my photography, that would be terrible advice, because I don't typically shoot really deep scenes. So more often than not, my scenes will typically start at, I don't know, 30 meters away, and they might run to half a mile or a mile away, or infinity, basically. Now that is nowhere near as deep a scene as, for instance, if you've got like a, I don't know, something 2 feet from the camera and you want everything up to infinity in focus. And if that's the case, then f16 is a decent solution. But if not, then you're just cutting out light unnecessarily. And on a personal note for me, if I've got something like 2 feet away from my frame like I did this morning, chances are I want it out of focus, not in focus, because I find it too distracting if it's in focus. Anyway, I say all of that to say that often people will say things like you should shoot at f16 to get everything in focus, but it might not be the case for your photography. And typically it's said with such conviction that you think, oh, that must apply to me as well. So I wish I'd known that most of the stuff said about how to use a camera or how to get the best photos is just opinion. And that goes for everything that I've ever said as well. So yeah, keep that in mind. Do you miss Micro Four Thirds or no regrets going full frame? I don't know, to be honest. I'm sure I'd be absolutely fine still shooting Lumix if I didn't make these videos and need autofocus. I know Lumix has now got phase detect autofocus. Some people have asked me if I'd go back to Lumix. It's just too expensive to go through the whole process again of changing cameras, and like I said, they're mostly the same. For a new photographer, should I focus on learning editing or improving my shooting? Definitely, 100%. You're shooting. You can't edit a bad photo into a good photo, but when you're out shooting, you can turn a bad composition into a good composition. And then when you figure out how to do that, you can learn how to take a good photo to a great photo when you're editing. But you need to do it that way around. You can't learn editing without knowing how to take a good photo first. I mean, you could, but I don't think that's the way I would suggest doing it. What kind of metering do you use? Do you normally underexpose or overexpose? To be honest, with all the latest cameras, I pay very little attention to exposure. If it looks good on the viewfinder, I'm happy with that. I don't rely on histograms or peaking, anything like that. My Sonys, for instance, can pull all kinds of shadows out of the dark and all kinds of highlights back from whites. So yeah, I don't worry about exposure too much. I am aware though of a problem that I have at the moment, which is that lots of people in some specific videos of mine say that my photos look overexposed. And I think, even though that's an opinion that people are perfectly welcome to, I think it's mostly because the GoPro that I use for some of the footage, it's kind of like HDR. And so any scene that it's filming, it pulls the highlights right down into the midtones and pulls the shadows right into the midtones. And so then when I show a photo over that, the photo often looks a bit overexposed because it's so much brighter than the GoPro footage, even though I think if you were to look at it in isolation, I don't think the photo would look overexposed. So I need to find a solution to that. Probably just raise the exposure of the GoPro. That's probably the easiest thing to do. But yeah, sorry, metering, multi-metering, pretty much always. Because I'm taking photos that normally involve landscapes, I'm most interested in making sure that the entire scene is well balanced, not just a a face or skin tones or whatever. Have you struggled with imposter syndrome with photography? 100%, yes. People that I've heard talk about imposter syndrome seem to talk about like a feeling of thinking that someone's going to tap them on the shoulder and say, time's up. We know. And I feel like that's about to happen all the time. And the thing about photography is that because it's a creative endeavour, people are constantly thinking of new ways of thinking. It's not like science where there is a very specific thing and you either know it or you don't. With photography, people have got thoughts of all different kinds. And if you come across those people and they're thinking in a new way that you've not thought of before, you start to think, oh, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. And that's a feeling that I have a lot. So yes, lots of imposter syndrome. Best way to make a good looking portfolio. That's definitely a Squarespace employee, isn't it? This video is sponsored by Squarespace. So if you would like somewhere to show off your photography portfolio online, Squarespace is the best place for it, I think. There are loads of templates to choose from, and I've been using the template Wells for 5 or 6 years now. And I trust Squarespace to be the place where 99% of people see my work. They take care of things like image resizing brilliantly. I don't need to worry about any of the technicalities of running a website on the back end. There are lots of different pricing options. There are e-commerce options. You can have a blog. You can send out newsletters. The functionality is endless. And yet, it's super simple to use. So if you're looking for somewhere to show off your photos on your terms, i.e. not on social media, then definitely check out squarespace.com for a free trial. And after that, if you'd like to make a purchase, just go to squarespace.com/James and you'll get 10% off that first purchase. And a big thank you to Squarespace and that lovely Squarespace employee for a continued support of this channel. Sorry if you don't work for Squarespace. You probably don't, do you? But that worked well. Right, there are loads more questions, but hopefully I've covered sort of the majority of stuff there. Sorry if I haven't answered your question. I'll try and do another one of these soon. It's probably been quite a long video. An hour I've been filming for. See how long I can cut this down to. See you next week.